Hello, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brent Parton. I'm the Deputy Director of the Center on Education and Labor at New America. You have found yourself in the session on youth apprenticeship, aptly titled Nuts and Bolts, Impact on the Potential, the Impact and Potential of Youth Apprenticeships for the Early Care and Education sector. It's a real thrill to be here today with everyone. This is a topic close to mind of all the work we do at New America, and including with the work that we lead at the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. Today, we'll spend a little bit of time on the front end talking about what we mean by youth apprenticeship based on national practices, why it matters for the early care and education sector in particular, and how it's working and how it's unfolding in a range of different regions across the state of California, particularly through the leadership of community college professionals that are driving this work across the state. To take us through that, we have assembled an incredible panel of folks for the conversation. I'm going to ask each one of them to just wave and say hello. We have Joya Chavrin from Berkeley City College. Joya. We have Salvador Vargas from San Joaquin Delta College. Salvador, wave hello. All right. And we have Jill Zimmerman from Antelope Valley College. Hey, Jill. Awesome. So I will try to go fast to get us into what actually matters, which is the perspective of our incredible panel and the folks that have been doing this work on the ground. But first, again, I want to level set on what we mean by youth apprenticeship. A lot of what I'm going to share is derived from the role that New America plays, our Center on Education and Labor, in coordinating a national initiative called the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. PAYA is a multi-year initiative that's been around since 2018. That is multiple philanthropic partners came together to start and support. And we at New America lead this alongside great partners such as JFF, Advanced CTE, the National Governors Association, NAPE, a whole range of partners that if I sat here, we wouldn't get into the panel. But the key part is that this is an initiative that is solely focused on supporting states and cities to expand access to high quality apprenticeship opportunities that start in high school for high school age youth. That's key to the definition that I'll say a little bit more about in just a moment. But I do want to say why youth apprenticeship. And up here at the top of this slide speaks to that. We are involved with this as a group of public policy researchers who have looked at education and workforce policies along a range of issues, as well as best practice programs. And to us, youth apprenticeship is not just great in its own right. It's really a deliberate strategy to build a more inclusive economy by connecting the learning needs of students with the talent needs of industry. Allow me to translate that by saying, we see the potential of youth apprenticeship, going back to the title of this session, as an equity strategy. We know to connect with with opportunities in our labor market today and to build a career that is fruitful over the long term, young people today are not starting from the same place we asked of young people several generations and decades even ago. We know young people need some form of post-secondary credential and college credit in order to enter and advance within an occupation. But there's also that hidden driver of equity. It's the work experience, the mentorship, and ensuring that young people have access to that early career exposure to work under mentors and build professional networks and socialize the idea of what are the careers that they want to achieve. Youth apprenticeship is a program that addresses both of these equity imperatives. And to us, it is something that's not to be designed to be designed and then consider equity as an afterthought. We really have to think about equity at the center of design of these programs. And that's something we'll be able to explore a little bit with our panel today. As already mentioned, Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship is a national network of states and cities and national partners doing work on youth apprenticeship across the country. And we are proud to say that ECEPTS is one of our inaugural 9 grantees. We provided an initial grant to them to expand and drive their youth apprenticeship work across multiple regions in the state of California, and are excited to be continuing to work with them in the next phase of PAYA itself. So we talked a little bit about its potential. What is a youth apprenticeship? This is the first ever national definition. It was developed in 2018, builds off several state-based definitions for youth apprenticeship. Not every state has a definition for youth apprenticeship. And in fact, there's no federal definition for youth apprenticeship. So one of the first things the partnership did is work with a range of different experts, as well as practitioners on the ground, to define what this is. And first off, a youth apprenticeship is an apprenticeship. An apprenticeship has to meet what we call core 4 corners of programming. And that's what these bullets are on the bottom. An apprenticeship at its core is something that combines paid on-the-job learning under the supervision of skilled employee mentors with what's called related classroom-based instruction. That is the core idea that an apprenticeship is a job, it is employment, it is working with an employer, but it goes beyond that. You are learning skills and competencies through an apprenticeship that are supposed to be relevant beyond the needs of any individual employer, but relevant to the needs of an entire industry or an occupation set as a whole. So this idea that the apprentice is constantly in this experience of balancing theory that they're learning in the classroom with real world application is really the essence of the beautiful feedback loop that youth apprenticeship offers for young people, that you're learning about things, you're applying them, and there's a virtuous cycle for learning that happens across these programs. The other key elements we want to point out about a youth apprenticeship, as is the case with any apprenticeship, is that it's not just a job and that you're hired by an employer. It's built around attaining competency in an occupation. So apprentices are actually participating in a structured program where it has already been defined what are the skills and competencies and credentials they need to be earning along the way and able to complete that program and be fully employable and able to be an agent, free agent in the labor market, taking jobs with employers or building on that experience over time. In terms of an apprenticeship as well, they always have to culminate in some form of post-secondary credential. Often that is a blend of workforce certifications, but we argue specifically when we're talking about youth, it has to be post-secondary credit as well. That is because when you put the word youth in front of a youth apprenticeship, we are not just talking about the age of the apprentice. And that's something I want to be really clear about. We're talking about program design. The idea that a program is deliberately designed to be accessible to a young person prior to graduating high school. For many of us who are familiar with the education world, a youth apprenticeship is a program that looks a lot like an early college or dual enrollment program with a heavy work-based component. So the idea, one, that an apprenticeship is something, a youth apprenticeship is defined by the age of the participant is not how we are talking about today, and it's not what PAYA is about. It's about the idea of building very direct, deliberate pathways that combine working, that offer opportunities for young people prior to graduating high school to enter a program. In terms of what it looks like, going back to this idea of the architecture of a youth apprenticeship program, it transitions a young person out of high school through higher education and into the labor market. So these are multi-year programs, like any apprenticeship will be. An apprenticeship program usually starts with someone who's in their junior or senior year of high school, they're still taking some high school coursework, but in many cases, they're starting that post-secondary coursework, often with a community college, particularly in the early care and education sector, and doing some form of paid on-the-job learning. A lot of it happens in the summer. Once they graduate from high school, however, the apprenticeship does not end. That relationship with the employer continues because they're still an apprentice, and that relationship with the college continues because they're still taking coursework as they work towards full competency in occupation. So at the end of a program, and I'm not telling you every youth apprenticeship is 3 years, most are between 2 to 4 years, an apprentice is able to walk away with some really important things. Not only have they come away with a high school diploma, they have multiple years of paid work experience, and in many cases, tens of thousands of dollars they've earned over the courses of those programs. They have access to a professional network and mentors because true apprenticeships have structured mentorship and required elements as their programs. And they have, in many cases, earned both industry credentials and certifications, as well as transferable college credit. In some pathways, that could even mean a full-on associate's degree in those programs. To help understand why it's so important to see these elements, I want to hit on, it's one thing to define something and sort of set the guardrails. It's another thing to think about what's the vision and the aspiration. And the Partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship was designed not just to get more apprenticeship programs, it was to design high quality ones that deliver results for young people and actually deliver the outcomes that we all hope that they can achieve. In terms of, we have these national principles that accompany our definition. I won't go through them in great detail, but again, I encourage folks to take a look. We can share the resource page, but they're really trying to emphasize, one, that we are structuring youth apprenticeship programs around careers with a pathway. It's not to say an apprentice is in that job for the rest of their life, but you're developing a program that gives the young person options. We call it an options multiplier, that after an apprenticeship program, they could choose to stay and continue to work in that occupation. They could choose to go on and continue their education within that field or an advanced degree, or in many cases, they could do both. It's this idea of really, again, closing that gap between what it means to be a working learner, where you're not having to always balance school versus work, but that school and work together are something that are much more integrated and supportive of what the needs of young people are. Equity matters to us in apprenticeship. It is at the core central principle of how we design youth apprenticeship programs. That means that we have to be very clear about when you're designing a youth apprenticeship program, you're both confronting systemic equities in our K-12 education and higher education systems, as well as our labor market, including occupational segregation. So youth apprenticeship programs is not just about getting better representation of what exists. It's about designing programs intentionally to reach young people who have been disadvantaged by those structural inequities. Portability and adaptability as principles is about the idea that an apprenticeship is not just an employment program with one employer, but that young people who participate in these programs can build upon and stack their learning over time into an associate's degree and beyond, but that also employers across an entire sector recognize the values of skills and competencies that are achieved through apprenticeship programs. So that if one employer trains an apprentice, they know across town where there's another employer working with an apprentice, they're generally learning the same skills and competencies to be a part of a broader talent pool. That's an important way of assessing how employers want to get engaged, who often fear they're going to lose the people they train. But if they know it's a talent pool that's more sustainable they can draw from, it really lowers that risk. And the last piece I'll say is accountability. Apprenticeship programs require a very tight partnership across a lot of systems and stakeholders. There has to be someone who's accountable for the outcomes and the experience of both the young people as well as the employers that participate in them. Which brings me to my last point. To make all this happen is about a partnership. It's about a partnership that requires a lot of different people, but it has to include these folks. It's the idea that high schools have to be at the table because this is where youth apprentices come from. If our high schools are not valuing these experiences or enabling young people to participate in them, it's going to be a problem over the long term, especially if they're not lined up with what it means to achieve the graduation requirements. And when we come back to equity, who is getting targeted to these opportunities? Who is getting access to them? Our high school partners are key for that. Industry and employers, apprenticeship's a job. You can't have an apprenticeship without employers willing to hire apprentices. Employers identify the skills and competency requirements, develop training plans, and are the ones that hire apprentices and provide on-the-job training. The next piece that I'll say is colleges and universities, and we'll hear a little bit about from our partners today about the roles they play. But at minimum, what they do across the country, particularly our community colleges, is that they help design and deliver what's called related instruction in the parlance of apprenticeship. It's the post-secondary coursework that makes sure the skills and competencies apprentices are learning are not relevant to one employer, but relevant to a profession and an industry as a whole. And finally, last but not least, we'll hear more about this today, is the idea of the intermediary. A red triangle at the middle makes it sound simple. It ain't. It's a very complex set of roles that we'll talk to a little bit about our partners that community colleges can play. But ECEPTS itself is an example of a sector intermediary that's playing another set of roles of working with partnerships to make sure no one starts from scratch, to make sure that there's high standards for programs, to make sure there's accountability for results. It's really the critical glue that holds together these partnerships. So I am going to attempt to stop there. I have lots of things happening on my screen right now. There we go. Very busy desktop over here. I hope that was a helpful overview. I tried to squeeze it in under 15 minutes, but now let's get into the stuff that matters. Building that partnership and building these programs is a journey and it's an experience. And you're with 3 people today who are on that journey. You're on different stops or starts in that journey. So you all have lots to share. And apprenticeship programs are highly place-based. Again, the colleges, the employers, the local economies, the communities that these programs exist in shape what those partnerships look like and what those programs need to look like. So we'll get 3 really interesting perspectives from folks who are on different spots in that journey and in very different regions of the state of California, which is a native Californian. I can say it matters a lot where you are in the state and how this work happens. So I do want to start off by just coming to each of you to just help expound a little bit on the introduction I've tried to provide, to share a little bit about where you are in the journey on youth apprenticeship right now. And Joya, because you get the great honor of being one of the first movers in the state of California and a partner to us from the beginning with the partnership to Advance Youth Apprenticeship. Could you take a couple minutes to talk a little about the journey that you've been on, both at the work at Berkeley City College, but with the range of other partners in the community of the East Bay to make this work happen?
Of course, thank you so much, Brent. It's such an honor to be with all of you today. And again, I'm at Berkeley City College, and I am the interim dean for the past 7 months. Role. I was the workforce development director across 4 counties and had the honor to work really closely with Dr. Randy Wolf and the pilot of phase 1 of the PAYA grant that Brent mentioned, in which we intentionally sought out a high school with an equity focus to address the teacher prep pipeline workforce needs to grow our teacher preparation workforce through a youth apprenticeship. We realized we needed to basically design something intentionally that got younger youth or high school students interested in working with careers and with children and families. They may not necessarily want to be a teacher, but what are some opportunities that we can provide through a youth apprenticeship intentionally designed model that didn't trap students into one particular field or sector. And so we partnered and basically just to share with you, and thank you, Brent, we had a Head Start apprenticeship program, which was our adult model. And we realized the success in marginalized and linguistically diverse adults returning to school, matriculating through that pathway. What we ended up doing was designing an intentional junior and senior access point for them to take college classes to earn an industry recognized certificate. We targeted students who weren't necessarily thinking about college, but wanted to get some experience. And so this was at, and I'll keep it short, you said 2 minutes, at a high school that is in Oakland. And what was wonderful about this high school is it already had an early care and education program on campus. And that program had been on campus for a few years, but the students had never engaged in an intentionally designed work-based learning experiences through an apprenticeship program. So we were able to provide 6 units their junior year, 6 units their senior year. That led to an industry recognized certificate, as Brent mentioned, and that certificate stacked to an AA degree. The courses were interdisciplinary designed in case they wanted to go into other fields as, social work or the care economy, as we're hearing a lot of that discourse lately. So human services, so all of the courses were GE transferable and general education transferable. I won't use acronyms here, and the interest of the students to actually apply what they were learning in their college classes with their experiences of working with young children. The program on the high school campus was a Head Start state-funded program through one of the biggest employers in our area, Cadango. And what was wonderful about this amazing partnership, like Brent stated, it takes a partnership of the employer, as well as the high school, as well as the college. And all of the units were offered through Berkeley City College. And so I'll stop there, and as you all ask questions, I'll chime in. But we learned a lot from that first phase, and we're so excited by the kickoff of the second phase, which we can talk a little bit more as Brent moderates with the additional questions.
We certainly will. I want to ask one quick follow-up question, because I think it's an important one, which is you had an established registered apprenticeship in the care sector, but can you say, what was the tipping point, or why apprenticeships are complicated enough? So what made you to be like, well, why don't we make this a youth apprenticeship? What was the main motivation or reason why to really connect this work to young people before they leave high schools?
Of course, thank you, Brent. Because we realized we were providing opportunities for those on-ramping to a new career. And there were a lot of similarity needs. As we're thinking about growing the teacher preparation pipeline, and also looking at the demographics of our workforce of predominantly women and with their own children and trying to, struggling to survive within systematic structures that make it hard to go to school, as well as work, as well as on-ramp to a new career and the support services that were needed, we realized that the opportunity through early college credit, some of their children were interested who were high schoolers. And so I will just say, and Brent, continue to scaffold, the interest was there, and the opportunity to engage in looking at pathway opportunities for younger, and you named it. And if we're going to really address the teacher shortage, we need to provide early career experiences and awareness to populations that and by the time they get to college, they already know, I don't like working with children, or I love working with children. It gives them an opportunity to really explore their interests, as well as not, I can talk about the barriers and once you become a college student of maxing out financial aid. This is free. You get integrated supports. You come from a premise of ensuring your success. We want you to be successful in your classes and your work-based learning experiences. We provided, essential trainings. We call it soft skills training. I call it essential training, to ensure once they're onboarded on the job, that there is a mentor or coach that Brent mentioned that is going to be there to reflect with you about the quality of your work and your interactions with the youth that you're engaging with. So I will say that, I didn't introduce myself fully, but our program was a Head Start apprenticeship. We founded that to address the teacher shortage. Now it's the Early Care and Education apprenticeship, the Early Educator apprenticeship model. And we realized it worked, because that first tier was 12 units. And those 12 units were degree applicable and industry recognized. Why not provide an opportunity to youth to also engage in the same access and experiences that many of our participants were young parents, or had children very young, and we realized that it could be an opportunity for them to engage a little earlier than waiting until they wanted to return back to school. And then this other part of it, Brent, is our workforce is aging, and we need to figure out how do we bring a pipeline in that has some intentionality from the beginning, and some ensured success, integrated support early on. So I hope that answer is it.
Always. And Dr. Joya, the first mover in California, you have an incredible wealth of experience for everything that you've done. Thank you for sharing that. We're going to come back to you for plenty more. But for the moment, I want to head south to Los Angeles County. Jill, you're next on the journey list. You've been doing incredible thinking and work with ECEPTS about the youth apprenticeship model and how it applies to the work down in LA County and Antelope Valley. Would you mind giving us a sense of why you've started on the youth apprenticeship journey in particular, and kind of what are those pathways that you're focused on, and where are you at right now?
Well, thank you so much. And again, it is such a pleasure to be here. Antelope Valley College, although we're in LA County, we are, as they say, that's down the hill. We are really in the aerospace industry, and that's where a lot of our careers come from, is, all the experimental flights and all of that kind of stuff. But we come from an area that is very economically challenged. And as a result, a lot of our students in high schools don't see themselves as college-going students. And this model allows us to enter into the educational realm with students in a place where they're already pretty familiar, which is high school, and says, yes, you can. You can do this. We're going to help guide you. I think Joya talked beautifully about the support systems that we're going to put in place for all of our students. But it's not at Antelope Valley College. It is not a singular high school. We are a very large geographic issue. It could be a 2-hour bus ride from one high school to another. And so we're looking at the college being that hub that allows for students all over the valley, we call it our valley, to come and take a class. And it's the similar thing as Joya talked about. scaffolding those courses, allowing them to go into different fields. We have very strong supporters in our employment-based, particularly our county, LA County is helping to support, doing a lot with working with children and families and ensuring that we have quality teachers and quality social workers and quality childcare workers. So by starting in high school, they already have, if you will, this huge leg up. And because youth employment is hard to come by, we are creating an employment range, which many of these students are helping to help support their families. So it is career gold, it is career decided. And if they love this field, they are already well ahead from their peers to increase their income and increase their skill sets. If this isn't, then they are also degree applicable and they can say, you know, I really don't think this is where I want to go, so I'm going to go somewhere else when they transfer. But now they know they're college ready. They've had that college success and that efficacy about what they can do. And that really is an equity practice that I think makes so much sense starting so young when they still are able to adapt and adjust with our support.
Fantastic. And could you say a little bit about kind of real quick, I will say the why you talked a little bit about the why youth on this front, but the employer, you mentioned LA County, for example, what's their motivation in terms of youth that came to you? Like, what made them open to exploring this? Because that's always one of the challenges sometimes is working with employers on that front.
I think it's twofold for an employer. There's probably more, but from my seat, I see two huge ones right now. One is that they get people who are going to be in the field sooner and ready and prepared equitably across the board. They've had those experiences, they've had the related coursework, that industry standard is set for them. And then they can help move them through that and onboard them quicker into their field or into their employment. The other reason I think is that all of the counties in California particularly are looking at how to help youth. And some of these are troubled youth. Some of these are youth that don't have a direction. Well, now they're already in a program and they're redirected. So it helps on both ends. It helps in the getting people into the careers and getting them going. And it also helps addressing what do you do with an 11th grader that's going into 12th grade and can't find a job at our local stores. They're not just hanging out. They're doing something extremely productive. They're being a part of the solution instead of potentially falling into an area where it could be a problem. And so it supports them. And more importantly, it creates that network of what does it look like to have people in this field and to connect them long-term. And the goal, of course, for us is for many of these, they would need maybe an associate's degree or a bachelor's degree, or even a master's degree in social work if they wanted to stay in doing that. So, or some other field of counseling psychology and those kinds of things, teacher. So it's to all of our benefits to help our youth find meaningful, productive things to do. And certainly one of our big employers, the county, is right on board with that and finding adaptable ways for us to accomplish that.
It's awesome. And I certainly want to dig in a little bit on that pathway and how you're thinking about it. It's really cutting edge work. But before I do that, we're going to get on I-5 and head north and up to you, Salvador. Could you, I know you're earlier on your journey, on the youth apprenticeship journey, but could you share a little bit about how this work, where you are right now and thinking about this work and launching these pilots in the San Joaquin region? But can you speak a little bit too about where this sits in relation to like why this sector in particular? I know there's a number of different youth apprenticeship types of initiatives popping up in the greater San Joaquin area. Why is this sector in particular one that you think is important for the region's economy as well?
Oh, thank you, Brett. So that's an easy answer. It's Dr. Randy Wolf. That's how
okay, next question. But
exactly. So that's how we ended up here. No, honestly, I think I've been involved with apprenticeships for many years. I've been at Delta for 33 years, so quite a bit of those years involved with apprenticeships, mostly traditional. In the last few years, we've changed that, and we have looked at some creative ways of looking at other apprenticeships. And so we went from traditional apprenticeships to a high school apprenticeship, which you may want to call it youth apprenticeship, but this is an apprenticeship with high school students focused on IT. Now, that in itself, it mirrors exactly a traditional apprenticeship in all aspects of that and all challenges of that. What we were missing is exactly this part where how is a high school student going to be able to maneuver through an employment that relates to a program of study at the same time and be successful when a traditional apprenticeship is basically mandated that you learn this and you get paid for that. And so in terms of that support or the wondering or the exploration is not necessarily there. That's taken away from that concept. What this offers and what I'm excited about is this opportunity is offering a high school student to explore beyond just a book, beyond just a classroom setting. It actually is exploring into the actual application of the content they're learning. So for me is, I don't need to be sold on apprenticeship. Apprenticeships are it. I mean, if we can have every single student on an apprenticeship program, we need to. How we get there, I don't know, but we need to. So this is one way of augmenting the work that we're already doing. And so for just as a coincidence, early childhood education is something that Delta College is really focusing on because there's a great need. But we're not only focusing on the need, we're also focusing on the equity in terms, like you were saying, in terms of the workforce and the broader context of how are these individuals going to be able to benefit from that work, going to be able to survive, going to be able to have a living wage out of that work. So for me, it's more than just having the students and having this opportunity to work with a lot of partners, high school partners in the district, which many of them are anxious to work with us in this regard. But it's going beyond that. It's the ability to create in the community an opportunity for high school students to see themselves in a real opportunity for a real job, right? Not to say that McDonald's is not a real job, not to say that, that sort of work is not a real job, but a job that can take them beyond the high school, beyond the, just the worker. They can become teachers, they become owners, they become directors. So there's the potential for a high school student. And this is the opportunity that we need to allow that experience to happen. So once the high school students experience that, we would hope that that same student can attract other students. Because as you know, high school students, the best marketing way or the best marketing material or the way that they do the best marketing is through each other's word of mouth, right? So we want those high school students to be engaged, to be excited about this, and to have that opportunity to experience it. And what a better way to get paid along the way.
Well put. And I want to ask just one quick follow-up question to pick on your experience with apprenticeship. Apprenticeship is not new for community colleges. Community colleges, especially in the state of California, have been involved with apprenticeship for a long time. It just so happens that most apprenticeships in the United States, and certainly in the state of California, are in a pretty narrow set of occupations, often what many of us would think of when we think of apprenticeship in the building and skilled trades. And in California, firefighting is a pretty significant source of apprenticeship programs. So Salvador, I'm sure that you didn't get any questions when you said, I want to do some work on apprenticeships at Delta College, but how did you manage the conversation to say, well, we want to do apprenticeships, but we want to do them in the early care education sector? What was important? Who did you have to bring along at the college to kind of have that conversation, or even with the state and the registered apprenticeship system?
Faculty is in this case a champion, right? This individual is committed, has the stamina, has the wanting to, is excited, and believes in this opportunity. It's beyond just the fact that they want to teach these courses to the students. It's the fact that they want to convey this great opportunity that can be beneficial long term. So we found ourselves a great champion to lead this effort.
That's very helpful advice, and it won't be the last bit of advice we seek to get from this session. The session is titled Nuts and Bolts, so we've got a lot to cover. I want to just do a quick roundup to help with some nuts and bolts questions, and I've had a few things come in on this I want to make sure we address. And Joya, because you're the most senior experienced at implementing these programs, if you want to kind of lean in this, but Salvador, Jill, please jump into about how you're thinking about these things. I think that often when people hear youth apprenticeship, they're like, okay, you got a high school student that's taking high school classes. They are working, so the apprenticeship, they're getting their on-the-job training hours. They're also taking the related instruction coursework. How the heck does a young person balance that time? Joya, could you say just a few words, like, again, at a high level, knowing there's a lot of variation, but
Right.
how does that look? How many hours are they generally working or spending? And how does that allocation of their time shift over the course of the multi-year program?
Of course. I mean, of course, the faculty buy-in, but I do believe the integration of student services support to think about what their goals are, their career, their transition plan. That's why we're targeting junior and seniors. And just as they begin to really explore and understand what their interests are, it becomes more intentional with regards to their time management and their success in school. So I do believe the integrated support services, the essential workshop trainings that we included, believe it or not, in their busy schedule. Summer's the best time to get the on-the-job training hours in. They were able to take, their classes. And I will say collaboration with the leadership at the high school to ensure the master schedule is responsive to their needs and offered at a time where those who do engage in word of mouth will have the most opportunity for students to access. Access cannot happen without an equity focus, and just thinking about the high schooler, including adolescent development, what's going on for them developmentally, and having adults in their lives that are responsive to those needs, and very intentional all around with regards to the program design.
So they're working pretty minimal hours during the school year while they're still in high school, but and loading up on OJT in the summer. That's very common, not just in this industry sector, but any industry sector.
Right.
And then as the program progresses, or they were to graduate from high school, the share of OJT and how they split time between earning and learning in the classroom can kind of balance out a little bit more. Is that fair to say? And that's not just on you, Joya, Jill, Salvador, is that how you would think about it as well?
Just adding, they make a little bit more money too. Upon graduation, they will have an industry recognized certificate, which allows them to access the workforce at a higher level than minimum wage. They come out with an associate teacher child development permit in California. And they also have connections and relationship with the employer who's wanting to hire. So they get jobs with benefits and again, allowed to work and matriculate through and work as they go to school. So my colleagues jump in, but intentionally designed to ensure their success and to ensure that they do access employment, as well as able to matriculate through to have a degree that's responsive to their interests. Because again, the degree is stackable to multiple areas with the AA and the BA degree.
Jill, Salvador, could you all touch it all? And because this is also a question that's kind of come in, how are you thinking about how this program can pretty well wrap with dual credit efforts that you might have with your high school district partners? Does that save on some of that, time that young people have to be sharing? Kind of, I talked about youth apprenticeship as a triangle across on the job, K-12 and higher ed. They got to travel that triangle. How are you thinking about dual credit as a lever that you're looking to pull to make this work for young people?
I can absolutely address it. I was literally talking about this just yesterday. It's not only the dual credit in process of speed, right? Because we've had lots of those. I run an early college high school. We have dual credit. We have AB 288. We've got all of those things. It is the economic engine. For these students, this program is free. And with the wraparounds that we've put in, it is free textbooks. It is free access to computer, it is free support services, it's all the things because they are full-fledged college students as well. So all the things that we offer for our students at the high school, they get for free. All the things they get at the college, they get for free. Our goal is to help people, particularly students who this might be they're the first in their family to go to college, right? To how to navigate a system that they are not familiar with, and they don't have anyone else that has been familiar with that, to keep them focused in completing high school, can keep them into the mainstream, going directly from high school to college. Particularly in California, there's lots of benefits for the Promise program, the Promise grant, ways to maximize their 2-year experience with not only certificates, but with an associate's degree after, which then puts them at a very higher rate of employment for full-time employment with benefits, which we always want for our students. And they could be doing that at age, 19, as opposed to 24 or 25. And still be able to manage going to school with our other partners, with our 4-year institution partners, so that they can transfer and continue to progress into those career fields. They become then part of the California economic engine, as opposed to still staying in that. And so when we say you're going to get not only dual credit, and you can get, but you start your high school credit, and this is free. You could technically do this all free of charge. So you're not indebted with loans, and you're not indebted with paying back all of that stuff. This is free for you. And students are going, what? Because they think college is out of their price range. And we just put it on a silver platter and say, it's right here, you can do it.
Thanks, Jill. Salvador, anything to add about kind of how you're thinking about the balance potentially of young people?
Absolutely. I mean, obviously, we all make use of dual enrollment. I mean, it's what a perfect way of working with the high schools, and at the same time, connecting to the college through those courses. But we have worked with all the districts, and we understand the dynamics in terms of scheduling. It's sometimes a little bit challenging, particularly where there's multiple high schools trying to work together into the same program. But we do that well. In addition to that, what we've done, and many colleges are doing the same through the Guided Pathways framework, and that is we provide this wraparound support. But in Delta, the way we've done that is that we have an individual who focuses on dual enrollment, and dual enrollment in knowledge meaning like how do you register, how do you get the classes enrolled, and all of that. We also have something called a success coach that understands all the academic services and other services that can potentially support the student. And I also have an apprenticeship coordinator that deals only with apprenticeship matters and anything that has to do with apprenticeship. So we provide this support to each and every one of the students to make sure that we are not having challenges and that they are not having challenges in terms of moving forward with their courses or the program in itself. But I think that in this case, it's a win-win for both the K-12 and the college, but more so for the students, obviously.
Well put. Want to take one step back real quick because and make sure want to explore a question of what success looks like for young people in these programs. Because what I will say is when we often think of apprenticeships, and rightfully so, traditionally we talk about training for a career, for life. And in many cases, the robust apprenticeship programs, like for electricians, doing a long apprenticeship program is about becoming a fully competent electrician in that job for life. In other sectors where apprenticeship is being used, particularly youth apprenticeships, where someone is starting very young, success sometimes looks a little bit different. It's the idea of a foundation. It's the idea of a pathway that can lead to a lot of different options. And that is using the apprenticeship model in a fundamentally different way. Could each of you just kind of reflect for a second on what does success look like for the young people who start and complete the apprenticeship programs you're working on implementing or building out? And anybody who wants to jump in first, just what do those options look like for those young All right, I'll
You
call
kind
on
of
you,
threw-
Jill.
But you kind of threw me a little bit when you said and complete. And let me just tell you that we've talked a little bit about this amongst ourselves about those success matrix. And of course, it's passing the courses. It's using all the standards. Did they complete the course? Did they persist in the program? GPA? Did they have successful evaluative activity on the job training and work well on that? But we're recruiting, if you will, 10th graders. Now really, if you can think in your family about a 10th grader, they're a little squirrely sometimes, and they're not always like, this is what I'm going to do for the next, 40 years of my life. So for me, and particularly in my community where we're still working on that college going culture, right? Making sure that college is an option for students. All of those normal matrix that we do and we submit to the state, and there's, student learning outcomes and all of those kinds of things. To me, a success is really, they have learned something about children. They might be the parent, and the things that they're going to learn in that class, the changing the trajectory in their family, bringing income to help move that family from food insecurity or housing insecurity to maybe more stability. Really being an advocate for the change in the society we want to see, instead of not having those opportunities and advantages. So I think anytime we can interact with a youth, particularly with some of the youth that we're going to be working with that might not have had these opportunities, changing the direction of their lives and their future lives, and learning how to deal with children when they become parents, if they ever become parents, and not repeating cycles of abuse and neglect. California faces a huge number, 400,000 students, kids in foster care. If we could help a family that understands the developmental ages of a child and stops that cycle, that's a success. It's a very long-term success, and I get that. But having good people in the field, understanding what's going on, and being great teachers, great childcare, great human services folks, that's to me the success of completers.
Joya, Salvador.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, I mean, I somewhat echo Jill. I was that 10th grader who had to work, and I do believe it gives, you're thinking about the equity focus of what our youth is faced with, and they're going through their own identity formation at that time, so to speak. So learning about who they are, and our coursework is foundational in child adolescent growth and development, and they realize, oh, this is why I'm sleeping longer. So in addition to becoming great parents and college students, they're learning a lot about themselves, their interests, and having opportunities and experiences that they wouldn't necessarily have without these intentionally designed programs to give them access to both career and college degrees. So I'm just thinking about our pilot program, and what came out of it is just an incredible interest across not just human services. I had those who were interested in nursing and even biotechnology when they learned about brain science. So those are classes that, weren't typically offered, and were in collaboration with the high school. And the success part of it is they got paid, and they learned about themselves. They came out with at least minimum 12 units, and many of them went on. All of our pilot cohort started off with about 22, 16 completed successfully, and they went on to college. I still hear from them. Even the couple who started the pipeline late, literally 2 weeks ago, Dr. Shavrin, I finished that last class. I want my permit. And I said, I'll do it myself because I taught the class. So you have these relationships and a network. Networks are not automatic, and students who are struggling to survive, or their families who may not have gone to college, don't know how to navigate the cultural capital of higher ed. So having these incredible networks at such a young age and people who ethically care about them is another success all around. I mean, it really shows that I can do this and just, you know, the stress of final exams and all that they experience, at the end of it, it just feels so right and so good. And I know apprenticeship can't solve everything that's been around for a long time, but it's a tool to address some of the equities we're seeing now, to address, you know, what's necessary, you know. So go ahead, Salvador.
I mean, I agree completely with both Joya and Jill, and I don't think I have much to add other than, I mean, success to me, the way I see it is the impact we're going to have in our community, particularly the community that we have around San Joaquin County, low income, challenge, multiple barriers, at one point, 50% high school dropout rate. I mean, it has its challenges. But if you can turn that around through other opportunities, and not to say, like they both were saying, that this is what they're going to do, but at least they have a view into a window of what can be. And if they have that opportunity just to see themselves in a different venue, I think that we have been successful. Because as it is right now, there's nothing for them to see themselves other than what it is.
So we'll put it across the board. So I'm going to build off this theme, but also get into a little bit of a nuts and bolts question. You know, we in the partnership, Advance Youth Apprenticeship, there's always the question of who are these programs for, and that is a big picture question about how these programs are situated in addressing the equity imperatives in the country and our communities. But it's also a very practical question for practitioners in terms of how they think about recruitment. I'd be interested if I could hear a little bit from you about how you've approached that, knowing that you have all centered this work on equity, and at the same time knowing that you want these programs to reflect the communities that they exist within, but also confront some of these structural barriers for populations that, as you said, Jill, might be first generation college students in some cases. How have you dealt with that both? And I want you to kind of boil it down to the recruitment question of like how you've approached that. Have there been kind of prerequisites that you've thought of in terms of what it means, not only just for, not even that in terms of young people, I mean that in terms of the schools that you've worked with to recruit young people out of? So maybe Joy, I'll have you go first to just share a little bit how you all in the pilot work that have addressed the issue of recruitment and who's gotten wind and been pulled into these opportunities or chosen these opportunities.
Relationship with the leadership on campus, really making clear that this is an equity, and our intention is to address the students that wouldn't typically see themselves on a college campus. We want all students to have the benefit of our program, because again, we do have a huge teacher shortage and we are trying to address a workforce crisis. And with that, I will say the relationships with the leadership, as well as, like Salvador said earlier, the word of mouth. Once it gets out that I can get college credit and get paid, there is some unlearning to do with regards to early care and education and the wage issue. I know we have a wage issue, and that is a systemic problem. And again, apprenticeship is a tool, but it doesn't solve that deeply rooted issue that hopefully gets resolved soon with this additional funding. But to say all that, it gives them an on-ramp to incredible opportunities. So I just believe the relationships and the power of knowing the counselors and the support services on their campus as well as the college campus. But we targeted everyone that expressed interest. We didn't leave them out if their grades were bad. We provided support to figure out, well, what's going on with your grades? Let's talk about that. This is what success looks like as you matriculate through. And then if there were some that needed college recovery, we had some student ed plans to help them. If they couldn't get into the program now, it doesn't mean they can't access early college credit and do it later. So I just want to share, we took the cohort and we learned a lot from the students. It was a pilot. And as we learned those ingredients of what makes it successful. Now we're thinking about our recruitment for this launch for phase 2 and allowing the, and I don't know if we're going to talk about that, but because of the pilot, we learned some of the interdisciplinary needs, the supports that were already embedded on the high school campus that we weren't aware of, and as well as how to ensure, for example, those who have special learning needs can still access the program, and how to work with, that's not typical for college instructors, but how to work with other internal partners to ensure the success, because you're not doing this in silos. It's definitely a partnership and a relationship with others to ensure.
I fully invite you to share a little bit about how you're thinking about that in phase 2. What are some of the kind of things that you're thinking about differently in terms of the recruitment this time around?
Just in the beginning, their goal setting and just thinking about the transition plans, it would be great to really connect with them at 9th grade to ensure if there wasn't a class they were missing for their A through G requirements, that we figure out how to embed that in. So it would be awesome to actually, and we talked about this, to introduce the program early on as they're able to access it in their junior year, but this is what it looks like from 9th grade on, because we did have a couple of students that said, oh, I have to take this class, and the way our class was scheduled with the master schedule of the high school didn't allow them to take it. But what's great right now, I hate to say post-COVID, is that a lot of our classes are online, and it's still provided the access for that student because they already have their college student ID, and you don't want to lose them, and so you stay connected. But just a real intentional plan design based on their goals and express interests, and building really authentic relationships with the counselors and the leadership on campus, and addressing some of the things that we may believe is limitations. It's just more targeted tutoring support. We provided more embedded tutoring, and just, we start from where they are. You use the data of who they are, and then you build. And in the college, I mean, we're struggling with the same pathway design as well. We have many students that come in not quite sure, and so really intentional about the pathway. But at the high school level, making sure they're not trapped into one sector, giving them an interdisciplinary option to explore and ensure they have choices. A degree with an industry recognized certificate, equitable, they're not being trapped in a low wage field, for them to do anything they want to do, anything from early care and education to human services to social work, just working with children and families.
I'm so glad you underscored that, and that has been obviously, through PAYA, the traditional, we know that the traditional parlance of we should be building youth apprenticeships to target sectors that are already high wage, because those are the jobs to achieve. At the same time, the elegance of what you've put together in terms of a program that is a foundation and that offers multiple disciplinary options and uses the apprenticeship model to engage students to get earn and learn opportunities has always been such a powerful, compelling element of the vision, and deals with the equity imperative in such a unique way. Jill, I'd be interested to hear from you about the recruitment question as well, though, and how you all are thinking about it as you kind of enter into the next phase of the work.
Well, there is no doubt that everything that Joya said is about connecting with the leadership at both the high school, the district level, our campus, and understanding where we're going and how this is, and if you will, it's pretty innovative in the new way of looking at apprenticeships, and having all of those powers that be shift to understand where we are. There's an important piece for us, and that is their parents. A lot of our students are at an age where it's based on what their parents will allow them to do. Not most of our 10th and not all of our 11th graders are able to own their own car, get into the car, and drive to campus. Now, COVID will help because most of it will be online, but they don't also have the same access. They don't all have the same hotspots opportunities. They don't have all of that. And to connect a parent to say, not only do they have to go to high school, they have to go to college, but here's the kicker. The kicker is, I'm sorry, my light, I'm not moving enough. My light keeps going off. The kicker is that we have a job for you. You don't have to think about getting a job because we've got it built into this program. And this is a deliberate program with deliberate employment, which leads directly to a certificate. And so we do a parent, we're doing during the day to the 10th graders. We're in their classrooms, we're working with our counselors, we're in the high school classes that we're visiting. but we do one at night they can invite their parents to in a Zoom meeting to make sure that parents are on board with, what do you mean you're taking another class? What do you mean you're a college student? I don't know. What do you mean you're going to ABC, right? So to me, that's a marketing strategy that I think is really, really powerful. One of our programs, our first year experience, has a parent program. We invite those parents to be a part of that as well, so that they understand some of the college lingo and some of the support systems. So all of a sudden the family now becomes connected. We found when we started some other similar programs, the parents said, I've always wanted to go to college, but I just didn't know how I could. And so we helped make that happen. And now you have a household that's supporting careers, not just making it paycheck to paycheck, hopefully. So that's an interest in our marketing. We have it all up on our website. It's in English and in Spanish, in our community, which is an important component for us. And we've worked with some of the other partners that would be willing to be employment for them, that they're marketing to their clients and letting them know, hey, you've got a kid about this age. How about thinking about joining? So looking at from both the schools, but the community and where they go and helping to support that. And particularly in the cities, summer recreational programs. Well, this is where they would have an opportunity to work, to connect what they've already been doing. So.
Pivot a little bit to another question that I think is again related to this, but it's an observation that we're here talking about apprenticeship. We're talking about apprenticeship in a certain sector. We're also talking to people who all sit at community colleges, and as going back to kind of the map, there's always a role for post-secondary to play in a high quality apprenticeship program. It's not always the intermediary intensive coordination role, but in this sector in particular, feels like community colleges, people who are at least sitting there, play a really important role. So I'd be interested to hear from each of you why to play a kind of more expanded role in these youth apprenticeship programs. And maybe Salvador, I'll start with you as you're going down this journey.
You may have to repeat the question, Brent. You kind of disappeared for a second.
I saw that. Why do you think community colleges play a particularly important role in youth apprenticeship programs in this sector?
Well, to me, maybe I'm assuming, and usually I don't like to do that, but if the intention is to provide the high school students with an opportunity to move forward to a higher level of education, then the next step would commonly be a community college. Why? Because it's local, because it's free, because it's supportive, because it has all the right qualifiers for this student to be successful beyond what they started. So it doesn't happen by chance. It's a lot of work with the districts, a lot of work with the high schools, a lot of work with the principals and vice principals, career technicians, counselors, and so on. So everything that we're talking about doesn't occur in a silo, right? It occurs because there's all this family, all this connectivity that engages and allows the student to say, now I have a vision of where I'm going to go. And that next step could be a CSU, in the case of California, a CSU or a UC system. And why not? Great, let's move forward with that. But just in case, there's something as important, if not more important, called a community college. And so that step forward allows the student from high school to college to a bachelor's, to a master's, to a doctorate.
That pathway element is certainly key.
That pathway.
College sits. Jill, why else? Why do you find yourself sitting in community college and you're playing a lot of roles in the work? Why do you think the work has found you there?
The community college, I mean, that's what we're designed to do. And we are placed in our communities to serve our communities. And we know our communities, both the employers and our K through 12 partners. We are that center, and we know how to make the student the center of that experience. And so in our particular case, because no one high school meets that need. California is a huge charter school state. this allows for those students to join and not say, well, it's not at my school. All of them are all welcome at Antelope Valley College, as they are at any other community college, and they are on equal footing in that respect. So that's why we should be the driver. We work with industry partners. All of our CTEs has advisory committees. We work with them on a regular basis. And I think us being the hub really then talks about it, and working with ECEPTS and stuff, they then help take this to the bigger level, talks about this as an industry standard, talks about this in wages and those kinds of things, and why this is an important field to get into. But in all aspects, we are the conduit. We're the next line in economic development in our state, the state of California. We've got 2.3 million community college students. And with our youth apprenticeship, we're going to add a few more because we know that it's a way that's going to change our state, not just the lives of the individual students, but on the global picture, it will change the lives of our state, and how we think about employment in community colleges is that answer.
Awesome. So we've got that situated on the pathway. We've got the economic development role that community colleges play. I don't think Salvador and Jill took them all. Joya, why do you?
No, I was gonna say that, Brent, that you captured it. We're putting community back into community college. This is what we were designed to do, eloquently stated. So nothing else to add.
So one thing I just want to kind of touch on too is, we've gotten a few questions in here that pop a little bit on others. Again, this is using apprenticeship in a very new way than what we're used to. The labor unions have been a big part of sponsors of program. They're the sponsors of the largest programs in the country. They run their own training centers. Many of them work in partnership with community colleges. But I think the key thing in the building and skilled trades, there's an infrastructure for apprenticeship that's been there a very long time. And so I know one thing we always look to in partnership with, in trying to figure out where are the partners to support programs in new industry sectors, you have to ask, where's the infrastructure to support them? And community colleges have really stepped up to that role in many communities, not just in California, but across the country, because there's not that tradition, there's not training centers, there's not financing models. So when we look at even like IT, early care, advanced manufacturing to some large extent, community colleges have been key. Could you each though just share a little bit for a second, because there's a unique feature you have in the state of California where you have these regional partnerships going, but you've worked with a sector intermediary, ECEPTS, which is the umbrella, which we're all here. Could you just say a little bit about how that partnership has worked? What has ECEPTS done in its intermediary role versus like, what do you take on as a community college at the local level? And who do I want to pick on first with this? Joya, it's going to be you.
I love it. And we are here because of Dr. Wendy Wolf, because without her leadership and advocacy and pushiness, early care and education wouldn't be at the table because we are a non-traditional sector that wasn't included, as an apprentice, like apprenticeship has been around for a long time. And we're a sector made up of, you look at the statistics, it's only 6.7% women in a registered apprenticeships. Why is that? Early care and education should be at the table, must be at the table. And Dr. Randy Wolf's intermediary role has been incredible because, all of the database that she holds and just the glitches as we navigate, trying to fit around need to eat into a square hole, excuse me. But I just, her role, anytime there's a glitch, like with regards to having to do 2,000 hours or meeting the requirements of, the competencies and what does that look like as it relates to our curriculum construction. And luckily early care and education is already aligned to California's early learning development system. So it wasn't too much tweaking, but her role at the table allows us to speak a different discourse. We're used to California Department of Ed. I'm not familiar with Department of Labor. And so she's bridging us together in a way that we wouldn't have been able to to look at other ways to be creative in accessing funds for our sector, and ensuring that there is these opportunities for marginalized and linguistically diverse pipeline adults and youth. So, you know, the intermediary, I'm actually now I'm the dean over career education, and I oversee CIS, multimedia arts, business, applied technology, and I don't have an intermediary for those sectors, but I have leadership and faculty buy-in, very interested in apprenticeship. And luckily, California is doing innovative things to have a regional director of apprenticeship, Adele, to try to help us figure those things out. But with Randy, I don't have to really figure those things out. It's moving and shaking a lot quicker, and we have a high enrollment, and she's able to provide data needed that our colleges are still figuring out how to capture internally. So we're developing the systems to include this non-traditional sector, and it's been a wonderful learning experience. And I know we wouldn't move without having an intermediary, especially like Randy, Dr. Wolf.
Jill, I'm wondering, that's awesome, Joy. Could you share a little bit about how how ECEPTS as an organization has, Randy is inseparable from that. But could you share a little bit, I mean, as a region that was just getting started, like what is the startup support that a sector intermediary can offer to a community college?
Let me just tell you, I think, you know, what's been already said, we would not be sitting here if it wasn't for that. This sector would be left at the door. We would not have been invited to the table. And we saw in the last year of the pandemic, we are still suffering because childcare centers are not open. It became a crippling halt. And when you look at industry and you look at how things move, qualified childcare space is critical to this. And all of a sudden, we are now elevated, and these voices are not just singular colleges or singular pockets talking. It is now at the highest level talking about this, where there's dollars, where there has been barriers that can be collaboratively worked on. I don't know if the three of us would ever have gotten together. And now we're looking at from across the state saying, this is an important space. Look at what we're doing in California, and how does this translate across the nation, right? Because if we can do that here, then how does this ripple effect in all of the other areas? And it brings, I mean, I can tell you how at a community college, I can't bring half my staff back because they have no place for their childcare. So if we don't have someone at the table saying, we have got to start this field, and this field has to be important. And Randy Wolf, because part of it's her, but it's also who she's brought onto her team, has made it very clear that we are a force to be reckoned with. And we have to be able to have equal dollars to do what we're doing. We have to look at those barriers that we've put in place that does not compare to a trades union. There are different pieces and parts to this, and how do we get to play? And so she's been absolutely a mover and a shaker to bring us to the table. I don't think we would be doing this if it was not for her. It would be just too onerous for us to do that independently as an individual college.
No, I think going back to the triangle and the intermediary, something we always try to emphasize is that where you sit in regions, that's where people are educated and hired. And you need that intermediary that's coordinating the work on the ground. But those intermediaries need support from people that can offer, I think you've all touched on the critical theme of advocacy, and ensuring that there's access to resources and knowledge, and navigating the registered apprenticeship system, which is not easy to do as a new industry sector. That system is just not. Now, there's great people in the state of California to help with that process, but having that sector intermediary to help with that conversation is huge. Not starting from scratch on your program development, and that there's industry standards, to use your words, Jill, that even though programs might vary by region, there's a starting point. There's kind of a startup kit is key. And the third piece I would say is, that ongoing support and being able to know and learn and gather data and learn from one another as you go, that has been such a hallmark of the ECEPTS approach and collaborative model. And that is really kind of the best of how regional intermediaries and industry sector intermediaries work. So thank you for elaborating on that. With our remaining time, I want to turn a little bit towards, your thoughts going forward, but let's start maybe even reflecting a little bit behind you to help others who are thinking about going forward. I'm going to come to each of you to share just what would have been your lessons learned, even if you're early in the process, or what advice would you have for other people kind of sitting in the chairs you sit at in other parts of California, but parts of the country. There's people from all over the country at this conference, about embarking on the youth apprenticeship journey in the early care and education sector. And Salvador, you're early into it, but you've been on the path before of kind of doing innovative work at community college. What lessons learned have you already had to date? What advice would you offer to others in the state?
Well, that following on what it was just said or stated, is the fact that you have someone or an organization that has done basically all the work. For one, knowing how much work you have to do to develop a new apprenticeship program is tremendous. But to have the framework done already is huge. Not only that the framework is done, but you have an expert in the sector driving that framework. That really is very helpful as well. To me, I can only say this, is that we have to really understand the needs of the community. And for my community in San Joaquin County, we have a real need in early childhood education. We have a need for practitioners. And this is perfect timing. This is perfect for us to engage and do the work that needs to be done. And I would dare to say that in many communities it's going to be the same. So that we have an opportunity not only to try to help in the resolution of some of the issues, but establish something that can truthfully help not only, again, back to the student, because that's who matters after all, but impacts the community in many other ways. Not only economic impact, but the community in itself, health-wise, growth-wise, you name it. So to me, this is an opportunity that is given to you, gift wrapped, and the only thing you have to say is yes. So work is the same work that we always done in terms of workforce development, making those connections, working with the industry, working with employers. Most of us in the community college system has a workforce development something. So every community college understands that and knows how to connect to the community, knows how to connect to the industry. So again, this is to me not even a question of if, it was more of a question of when.
Thanks for that, Salvador. Jill, what about you? Lessons learned so far and advice for others?
Well, sometimes I get a little too real, but a lesson learned that I've done is find your champions. And they might not actually be in the direct line that you think they would be in. I always said, I think I got included in this. I'm the Dean of Student Life and Services. The others are, you've heard, are more CTE related. And I got here because I thought I was going to a free lunch. And then all of a sudden, I just got like, wow, we need to do this. This is the answer. So who are the champions who are going to be teaching the courses, the department chairs, the deans of that instructional piece? Who are the champions that are my champions unrelated to apprenticeships and never been involved in it? And I started to work with who are my champions. And it turned out, and we all have crises that happen in our life. One of our key champions died suddenly. And all of a sudden it was like, someone else has to pick up the thing. And so I went to my college president and I said, you have to be the champion, and I'm willing to carry this forward since she passed. But this is important to our community. So I find your champions, both on campus, in your high schools, and it might not be by their title. It just might be by their passion and their love. And that was the lesson I learned, because we're all in it for the right reason, but to add one more thing, right? Timing is everything. Like, oh my God. But to literally say, can you grab innovative, passionate people to do something different than how we've ever done it? And then the faculty to say, we believe that we can make this together and really be that team. That was the lesson I learned, is that it has to be a group of people that are willing to carry the charge and see what's best for our community. So
I'm going to follow up with you because you've invited it. And we hear about this a lot. It's not just early care and education, it's in all forms of apprenticeship on this. But you mentioned department chairs as key champions. How did you bring them along? Or did you run into any barriers with them?
I was very lucky. As I think all of us have been in our colleges or connected to our colleges for some time, I had known them in other ways. And I said, you're not going to believe what I think we could do. And I became the cheerleader. I became this, and they said, well, that's adding another class. And that's, we don't normally teach. I said, yes, you can. We can do this. And it was, for one, it was a cup of coffee. The other one, it was something a little harder. And I said, let's talk about what this means. And what does this mean for you? Because the first thing is that's going to be more work. And I said, it's going to be different work. It's not going to be more. It's going to be slightly different. And here's the benefit for that different work. And that goes back to relationship capacity that we talked about. We're going to be teaching our young people how to network. But that's what we have. We have relationship capacity with our employers, with our high school students. We're teaching that as Joya said, it's not a soft skill. It's a survival skill, right? It's a skill of how we navigate that space. And we've done that, or we would not have been successful in our careers. We're going to teach that to the next generation. And then we have to bring those that are not so positive. One of my naysayers says, I don't think this is going to work. And I said, then do me a favor. Just sit quietly. Don't get in the way and let me try. But if you don't sabotage it, it might just work. So I don't want you to be.
Love it.
I just don't want you to sabotage it.
Love it.
And he's now totally on board. But it took some time.
It's great. Joy, before I come to you on lessons learned, actually, as I go, I'm trying to pull in some questions, some targeted questions that come out. But Joy, I know you've got a lot to share on that front. I'm going to come to you, but real quick, there was a question from the audience around ECE mentors and how they fit within the apprenticeship model. I don't know. I think Salvador, Jill, anyone who wants to offer any thoughts. Salvador, put your hand up first. I'll go to you. Where do they fit?
Actually, I was pointing to Joya.
Well,
but yes,
by all means.
I can answer as well. So traditionally, apprentices do have a mentor. So yes, the answer is yes, they will have a mentor. In the traditional sense of apprenticeships, it's a requirement. So in this case as well, you would have a mentor mentoring the student on the job.
Yeah. Right. And just to add to that, I mean, we have a wonderful ECE California mentorship program that the shift would be what Salvador said, on the job. So the journeyman is on the job, assessing their competency, their skills, and their knowledge as they matriculate through. And so it would need to be a design shift of not having the apprentice come to you, but the mentor actually going and being at the place of employment or the industry. So that's the little bit of the change when you think about the ECE mentor program in our state.
Asked and answered by the nuts and bolts model. Please continue to drop questions in there. We'll get to them. But Joya, I want to come to you. Lessons learned either in phase one or the journey you're at right now in phase two, and any advice to others around the country, frankly.
Just really quickly, Brent, I think the real for me is just the listening of the youth. The messaging matters. The messaging that we have about ECE with the parents. We did parent orientations. The concern of being in a low wage field. We got to realize foundationally, like our 12 units, there's only one class that's actually an ECE or education. Everything else is social science, sociology of the family, very intentionally designed interdisciplinary coursework that stacks to all majors. If they want to be a neurobiologist or a scientist or whatever field that they are interested in. I mean, like I shared when we talked about brain research, I had a student really interested in that. So so the lessons learned is not just, locking them in, because even if they're with a child for 3 years, working with a program for 3 years and they matriculate on, that's a powerful 3 years of that relationship with that child. I mean, the experiences that the apprentices had working with young children, I mean, they didn't want to stop. They looked forward to seeing them. And so I just, you know, we had to do a lot of the messaging piece to help parents understand ECE, the school understand the funding sources as it relates to low wages, and Randy's done a lot of that work. And I, you know, if it needs to be cleaned up, Brent, clean it up. But I'm thinking about the students and their experiences, and our pilot program is based on all of it to just ensure that it's providing equitable opportunities. Like I'm a dean of STEM, and there's not a lot of, you know, faculty that look like me, but being part of this program, you can be a science teacher or early care and education teacher that focuses in science and math and all of the other fields that, you know, that are higher wages. This foundational field provides you that opportunity to engage in not only teaching, but just a better human. So I that was really challenging, I think, in the beginning, just trying to get the interest. So because of that, we're just thinking about the intentional design and the messaging of the classes that they take. And I saw the warning.
Well, believe it or not, we have 5 minutes left. And so with the remaining time, what I want to do is kind of ask you a tried and true favorite question on these types of discussions. And it relates to kind of where we go from here. You know, youth apprenticeship demands, it asks something very different of our employer partners. It asks them to look at youth as a talent source in a very new way and to play a very different role in supporting the development of young people. Looks at our colleges to value a learning that happens outside of their walls and to play an active role in supporting and coordinating that. And then it certainly asks K-12 to value an experience that might not look like the traditional college track transition as we know it, and something that has much more tied to kind of earn and learn and work. So there's a lot of reasons that makes this work hard, and Jill touched on the attitude that you kind of need to have to make it happen. But if you think about all the barriers or all the things that makes this hard, and what's holding us back from really kind of taking this work to the next level? If you did have a magic wand, or what would you say is the one thing that you think is that we need to be focused on to kind of break through and make these types of experiences more widely available for young people in your communities, but also across the state of California and beyond? And I'll pick on each person once. And Jill, I'm going to come to you first for this one, if that's okay.
Wow, that's a great question. I'm not sure I really have a great answer. I think it is trust in the process, right? You know, education is systemically problematic. We have been doing it the same way and keep expecting to get different results. And it's not always easy in very entrenched systems to try something different and say, just trust that this will work. Although there's no evidence for it, by the way, but just trust that we're going to try to do that. And the evidence will come later. We are really challenging almost every aspect of a very lengthy structure. And if this works, then what else should we be shifting and doing? And it maybe opens the door for, is really the way we do education right? Is it the inherent racism that we have in our institutions kind of going to be challenged a little bit? So I'm not sure. I think it's pretty, it really takes a lot of innovation and fortitude and realizing what's right and trying to really say, we've got to do this, because there's barriers that are going to hit us. It just doesn't, it's just all new. And I think that's why we're good pioneers. And for other schools that want to try it, there's some, there's pioneers out there. We just need to bring them to the table. I don't know if that kind of answers it. But.
It does. Joya Salvador, with the 2 minutes we have left, where would you wave your wand?
More employers, more commitment from the college itself, the administration, top administrators, commitment to this type of work, not as a secondary thought, but as a primary goal. And definitely the community, the industry, the business coming to the table and saying, yes, we want to do this for you and work with you. I think those are critical if we are to help our communities, particularly our young people.
Yeah, I echo everything, and I'll just add youth wages, just more commitment to the wages. Not a lot of our employers cannot pay youth under 18, so the foundations are helpful, workforce development boards, but we do need systemic funding to pay youth.
Awesome. Well, with that, I want to say, both a blend of nuts and bolts and inspiration along the way. Thank you to all of you for taking the time out of your busy days to be here. It was a fascinating conversation, and I think a helpful one to everyone who's been involved. So thanks for everyone's time, and we will, I guess, call it a session. I'm not sure what happens next, but I'll say thank you again. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Thank you.